I'm Mike Emerlon. I'm a director on the Microsoft 365 ecosystem marketing team. And today we're going to talk about building blocks. Everybody loves building blocks. You've probably used them when you're a kid. You've probably built some really great things with them. Today we're going to talk about a different kind of building blocks that you can use inside of your application coming from Microsoft 365. I hope that in today's session, what you'll see is, maybe some new ingredients that you can sort of weave into the applications that you're building, and you'll discover something new from this. So let's get started. Let's dig right in and talk about the building blocks you can use inside of your collaboration application. So we're going to talk about 4 in particular, so it'll be a bit of a whirlwind. We're going to start by talking about sites and the capabilities that they offer that you can leverage inside of your applications. We'll then move into lists. So lists is a major cool new capability that we have inside of Microsoft 365 that we're actually updating some applications for. We'll get into that that you can also use inside of your applications. We have tasks. We have a number of ways to actually control how people organize and get things done, and how you can actually have them work on your processes and your applications by posting tasks to their task boards. And then finally, we have templates. Taking all of the different facets of your application, putting them together, making them available to users inside of Microsoft Teams. So we'll cover those 4 building blocks. Let's get started. Okay, so why would you want to actually leverage elements of Microsoft 365 in your application? We talk a lot about Microsoft Graph, which is a great way to take context and information, things like, for example, who is this person, their profile information, are they out of the office, what groups are they a part of? That kind of contextual information from Graph is one important scenario for leveraging Microsoft 365. And in addition, you can also bring your applications into Microsoft 365. You can take your apps, host them inside of Teams, or build a web part in SharePoint, or bring them inside of Outlook. But there's a third great use of the Microsoft 365 platform, which is taking all the different infrastructure, a lot of it that we use inside of our applications, things like Planner, and actually leverage them inside of your own applications to give you a jump start on building really collaborative applications. And so some of the reasons to go use Microsoft 365, the first among these is it's free. Now, of course, Microsoft 365 is not free. It's something that you have to pay for. It's a subscription. We hope that you get a lot out of Microsoft 365. It's pretty awesome. We're coming to you from Microsoft Teams. But if you're an application developer, chances are the audience that you're working with, the users that you're sort of collaborating and building applications for, they may have Microsoft 365 and they're already paying for it. And so leveraging some of those core building blocks means that you don't have to allocate new resources. You can actually just go leverage the building blocks of Microsoft 365 that you're already using inside of the organizations that your customers already have. So that's kind of one great reason. The next is kind of a, maybe it's a personal pain point, but, a lot of times when you think about, how to manage an application, how to make sure that the users have the right permissions to access all the right resources, that can be sometimes a real usability issue in dealing with applications. The first time somebody uses it, they have to get permissions, they have to sign in, they have to, navigate a custom authentication system. By leveraging Microsoft 365 building blocks, you're buying into this notion that chances are an organization has already subdivided their company into different groups, maybe a marketing group, maybe an engineering group, maybe a Northwest sales team, those kinds of things. And so by associating your different application assets with one of those groups, you automatically inherit all of the management work that a company is doing. And so you don't have to deal with specific user permissions because your assets are stored with the engineering team. The engineering team already has a list of users associated with it. So you don't need to go build your own app management tools. Next up, Microsoft 365 is compliant. And that's really, happens on 2 levels. First, Microsoft 365, in terms of its data centers, it's all around the world. It complies with a number of different industry standards, things like ISO 27001 and GDPR and those kinds of things. And so there's a lot of infrastructure in place already inside of Microsoft 365, such that if you host your application elements there, you kind of inherit that. You can make sure that it's not on a server under your desk where you have to worry, okay, what's the compliance strategy for this, so to speak. It's hosted in Microsoft 365 and you inherit a lot of those capabilities. The other level is that a lot of times organizations want to have policies on their content. They want to make sure that 6 years down the road, they can still access all of the engineering documents in case of needing it for a legal issue or something like that. So there's things like e-discovery tools to make it possible for organizations to go find content later if they should happen to need it. And again, by hosting your content and your application elements inside of Microsoft 365, you automatically inherit that sort of e-discovery capability, all of the great tools that a lot of our partners build. It will work against your data as well. Oh, another really good one, like search. By putting your content inside of Microsoft 365, you automatically get search capabilities. Just another, yet another bonus from, weaving your application elements into Microsoft 365. And the final among these is that they're pretty darn powerful. Working with tasks, there's a lot of flexibility, there's bucketing, there's prioritization that you can sort of take advantage of. So as tasking systems go, there's a lot of power there. And the same thing with lists. Lists have a lot of sophistication. They can have different query capabilities. They have indexing. I say powerful mostly because, yeah, lists are not database tables. They don't have all those different relationship capabilities, inner joins, outer joins, complex queries that you could do with a SQL table. So for a lot of applications, absolutely, you want to use SQL databases. You want to use NoSQL type of storage, depending on your application architecture needs. But if you're storing, maybe 10,000 items for an inventory tracker, a list can actually be a really great choice for those kinds of applications. So let's dive in. Now, behind the scenes, what powers all of these experiences is the Microsoft Graph API. That provides a way to access all of the different information that you see from Microsoft 365. And for these building blocks, it's your main way to actually get that value out. Now, architecturally, behind the scenes, everything starts with a group in Microsoft 365. So you can go access a group through the /groups/group identifier, within Microsoft Graph. And so you can, discover all the groups that maybe a user is a member of or create your own group. Now, groups are really just a list of users. So you can find the set of users that are associated with the group, all of the members of the marketing team or the engineering team, just by querying for the set of members that are associated with the group. Of course, you can find out more information about the users by connecting to that node within Microsoft Graph as well. Now, on top of a group is the concept of a team. So every team has a group that's provisioned behind the scenes. But if you want to manage, for example, all the team channels or all the team chats, you can access that through /groups/ID/team. Now, every team also has a SharePoint site that's provisioned alongside of it as well to provide assets like file-based resources and lists. So you can get an identifier to the site by /group_ID/site/root. And then once you get that identifier, you can actually work with all the different assets inside of that site. Now, one of the really key assets inside of those sites are document libraries, an ability to upload files. And now those are referred to as the drives. So you can do site/identifier/drives to access all the different document libraries for storing information. And then we also have lists as well. So with a list, you can do things, we'll talk a lot about lists in just a second, but lists are, that structured storage that you can see inside of a SharePoint site. And then finally, there's also similarly a set of planner plans. Now, if you've used Microsoft Planner, you'll know that it's kind of Kanban style board for arranging tasks, for bucketing things to go do. So similarly, you can go find the associated planner plans by just accessing the group identifier and then going and working with those as well. But you can see that there's this benefit here to where every application is associated with a group, so it's got this integrated user management, and these are all assets that you can access as well. Okay, so let's talk with sites, our first building block. So sites are basically SharePoint. And if you've worked with SharePoint, you know that it's got some really powerful capabilities for hosting, pages with web parts that users can customize and move around and design. You can create really beautiful and engaging sites inside of SharePoint, and this becomes an asset you can use inside of your own application. For example, if you want to let people create custom dashboards, maybe you can create some custom web parts, and you can incorporate those dashboards into your application as well, potentially by referring to those pages, creating custom pages, and the like. A really key capability is document libraries and files. So every SharePoint site has document libraries for storing documents. The PowerPoints that I'm showing you today came from a SharePoint site. And so that's a really powerful capability that you have there. If you're building an application, chances are your application probably needs some file capability. So for example, if you're a real estate application and you need to store pictures of the houses that you're working to sell, you can actually store those inside of a SharePoint site. You can build a user experience for letting people upload those pictures and then go show and reuse them. So there's a lot of powerful capabilities there, and you don't have to build that yourself. You can just leverage a lot of the SharePoint user experiences, the Graph APIs, and the like, and go from there. You can store custom properties on SharePoint sites. And then finally, we also have this capability for SharePoint lists, which we'll just talk about. Okay. All right. So let's talk about those lists. So lists, if you're familiar with SharePoint lists, this is kind of a way to go access all of the structured storage that you see inside of SharePoint. Now, every document library that we just talked about is also a list, so you can see all the different properties that are associated with it. But then, in addition, you can have standalone lists that are not associated with files, and these become, a little bit like, again, they're not database tables, but they're kind of like it a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about some of the capabilities of lists. Every list has a number of columns that you can store different properties for your items within. There's a lot of different flexible column types. So for example, you have a text field, a number field, a date field. You have lookups, so you can have every list item sort of potentially point to a set of users. So if you want to pull in users that maybe are the owners of this item, you can go do that as well. We added some capabilities to store location inside of lists. So if you want to maybe have the location of your real estate properties and you want to store that as a custom attribute inside of a list, there's a location field. And then lists also have simple capabilities for lookups from one list to another. So you can do some very basic relational type of connections between lists. So for example, if I've got an organization in list A and I've got all the documents associated with that organization in list B, you can set up simple relationships such that if I delete the organization in list A, all the associated documents in list B, get deleted as well. Now, a cool thing is they go into a recycle bin. So if you later on down the line say, I actually want to restore that organization, it gets restored back into your list and into your document library. That's, yet another cool capability, which is, you get, by building your application on top of lists, you inherit some great capabilities like a recycle bin so that people can recover from mistakes. Just another great example. The other thing that they have is indexing. So if you want to make your queries more performant, you want to make sure that you can scale to tens or hundreds of thousands of items, you can declare indexes on columns within lists so that your queries around them become just that much more performant. The final thing is that the views for lists are really customizable, both in terms of end users. They can sort of really customize a lot of properties for how their list shows up, but in addition, they can also write JavaScript through SharePoint Framework to actually extend custom list views. So if you want to create your own column type, for example, for tracking parts inside of your organization, you can create this part, basically pseudo column type where you track the identifier as text in a column in your list, and then you can write a custom visualization that will actually pull maybe the diagram for the part into the list, so you can build some really powerful and flexible views. The final thing is that lists are connected with applications like Power Automate and Power Apps. So if you want to build your own incoming ingestion form through Power Apps, you can go do that. If you want to connect your list to flows and processes, you can actually use Power Automate, connect it to the list. You can do things like approvals or maybe notification types, those kinds of things, all using the power of Power Automate. So it's really flexible capability that you can use for any kind of application that you're looking to build. Now, the final thing that we're really talking about today is we're kind of introducing this concept of personal lists. So yes, a lot of lists get associated with groups. They become a way for a team to go track different items that are interesting for them. So that's very powerful. But you can also store lists that are associated with a user as well. So as an application, if you want to track information for users, more broadly as they navigate amongst their different teams, you can actually store a list with a user. Now, for you fans of SharePoint and of SharePoint's history, this is actually tracked in the My site of the user. So, fun trivia fact for your SharePoint parties. But yes, personal lists, really powerful capability as well that we're bringing into sort of this overall list capability. All right, let's get to the code. Let's see, I am about 13 minutes in. Wow, 13 minutes to get to the code. Okay, well, we'll do better. Do better next time. Okay, so let's come to our Teams application over here. So this is my team site over here. Of course, we've got the chat going. We've got some bots, those kinds of things. We're working with Contoso Repair. I'm going to go click on the maintenance channel, which is where maybe our team goes and tracks maintenance issues and those kinds of things. Here you can see a number of chats that are going on as well. Now, in this case, what I have is an application for tracking our suppliers. Okay, so suppliers, very key to the maintenance depot and the maintenance team. So here you can see a list of all the different, suppliers that we are working with. Now, if you're familiar with Teams tabs, you know that really what a Teams tab is a website. So this could be a standalone website as well that I'm, hosting outside of Teams. You can leverage all of these ingredients that I'm going to talk about in your standalone websites. It doesn't have to be a Teams application, but of course, bringing your applications into Teams is always a great choice. So here's my list of organizations. You can tell that, this is all a bunch of my art, not very good. But this is kind of a set of fictitious organizations that we're going to be working with. You can see that I can also drill into these organizations, and I can see various properties about them, things like what's their location, what's their notes, what's their description. The other nice thing is I can see a set of documents that are associated with this organization. I can see there's a strategy, there's a greeting, and then there's a process outline that we can leverage in connection with Wingtip. Well, as you might imagine, the punchline behind all of this is this application that lists the set of suppliers that we have is stored behind the scenes inside of SharePoint. And so you can see here, I've got this list of all the different organizations that we were just looking at inside of my custom application. Well, they're all stored and tracked inside of SharePoint. And in addition, you can also see the set of documents that we have, the maybe contracts or proposals or those kinds of things. Ooh, looks like they're going to maybe consider an acquisition. You can see that those are tracked inside of the documents as well inside of SharePoint. And here what I'm doing is, let's go see, let me go scroll over. You can see that, okay, a number of these documents are tied into the customer. So a little bit of a relationship going on there, connecting these two, this document library and this organizations list together. And then I just re-leverage them inside of my Teams application. So let's take a look at the code. And so what you can see here is, this is basically going to go use a number of different graph APIs from JavaScript. And in this case, I'm using some very simple, plain old JavaScript. I'm not using a framework just to keep it simple. The first step for working with any type of graph API is to get an authorization token for Microsoft Graph. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leverage the Microsoft Authentication Library, MSAL, as we love to call it. This is a library for automating the process of actually connecting the graph and getting a token. But we also have some new SSO capabilities to make this even easier. I'm not leveraging them. I should. But you should go check out Teams SSO, which will automate the process of getting those authentication tokens easier for both you as a developer and easier for your users as well. Okay, so this is MSAL. And I can go acquire the token silently. So now that I've got a graph authorization token, the next thing I can do is go make an AJAX call. So for that AJAX call, again, if just a simple web request that I'm making to the graph APIs over here, trying to be as simple as possible. You can see I pass in that authentication token that I just retrieved from MSAL as the bearer header, as the bearer token and the authorization header right here. And then after that, it's really just a simple REST call. In this case, I'm going to go use the graph endpoint. I'm going to go get the site identifier, and then I'm going to go plug that into the list that we're working with that stores our set of documents in this case. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I want to filter the set of documents based on the customer that's currently selected. So I'm just doing a very simple REST query here to say, make sure that the customer identifier equals this right here, and go do a filter upon that. So this is just a very simple way to go retrieve a set of items. Once I do that, I have a bunch of JSON code that I get back as a response. Graph APIs are basically REST APIs. And so what I'm going to go do there is go take all the different fields that I get back from Graph and then go populate my web HTML from that. So this is just a very simple example of accessing those documents from SharePoint. Here's some code that does the exact same thing to go retrieve list items. And again, because in SharePoint, document libraries and list items have a lot of the same properties and semantics for how you query against them, this API call basically looks the exact same as my documents query. So here's just a very simple way that you can get started in code to leverage content from lists and from document libraries stored inside of a SharePoint site. Now at Build, we're super proud to announce a new experience for working with your lists. Those lists are stored in SharePoint, but what we're looking to introduce is a new hub for pulling all of your lists together into one place. We're also supercharging the user experience even further by adding new column types and new visualizations, a new grid view for actually managing all of that list data here. So you can imagine if we were running a conference in June, we have maybe a column for tracking the type of session, whether it's a meal or a workshop or a talk. We can do things like, again, have lookups to a number of different users. So if I want to have 2 speakers for Become a Person of Influence workshop, we can point at that user entry, so to speak, inside of Microsoft Graph. You get all their picture information. It's a really simple experience for end users as well. And we're pulling all that together through a hub to make lists that much easier to go use. The other thing that we're looking to do is, introduce a mobile application for actually having a great mobile experience for working with your list items, on the go. And so again, as an application developer, this is a great thing. If you're not building a mobile experience for your application, well, okay, you probably should build a mobile experience for your application, but you can also provide this lists application, which will be coming later this year, to let people go work with all the different items inside of their lists. When they're on the go, in this case, maybe they're doing, they're changing the status of a particular type of session, through a simple and streamlined user experience. So, again, this is kind of another great asset that, multiplies the benefit of you using these building blocks. Okay, so now let's talk about the next building block, which is tasks. Again, tasks are the most, some of the most powerful concepts around. If you're like me, you're sort of, your work is dictated by what's on your calendar and what's in your task list. So as a developer, being able to put something into people's tasks list is actually a very powerful, freaky powerful kind of capability. Now, there's 2 types of task lists in Microsoft 365 that you should be thinking about. First, there's the personal tasks that a person may have, the kind of individual things that they want to go track. These are known as to-dos, and they're exposed to the to-do application. And then we have group tasks in Planner that you can go provide. That's kind of a Kanban style board for listing all of the tasks that are available. And what we're announcing at Build is we have some updated to-do APIs. So again, if you want to go work with those personal tasks, we have a new beta endpoint for actually working with those to-dos. So we hope that you explore those APIs if you want to go create those personal tasks as well. But let's, in this example, go take a look at Planner. So let me come back to a demo. In our supplier organization, we've got a little bit of a workflow. So if you want to go reach out to a supplier, want to go work with them, maybe go update a contract, we have a process for actually connecting with that supplier organization. Now, the first step in that process is to go send out an email. So what will happen is I'll get a new email inside of my inbox that I can go work with that will ask me to go approve it. I'll just go use this older email while we wait for the new one to come in. Now, kind of a bonus topic here, but this email, what you see here is this custom form. This is called an actionable message. It uses a format called an adaptive card to basically embed a form straight into my application. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that here. There's a number of other great talks about actionable messages and adaptive cards, but this is a really powerful way to manifest a workflow. I'm going to say approved. This is a great supplier, like so, and go click approve. Now, what this is going to do is then go schedule a task within Planner to go, update and work with this particular organization. So let me go come over to Planner, and this is the real important part. You can see that, yes, that task that I just created, it actually got created within Planner. And so now my team actually has a way to go track all that information, with the comments and those kinds of things, straight embedded inside of the Planner. So I can take this, I can embed this board inside of Teams, make this information more accessible. But working with Planner is also a pretty simple process. Let me show you what the code looks like. So when I was in that email and I clicked approve, that kicked off an Azure function. So the Azure function has a bit of C# code over here that will basically do kind of the same thing that we're looking at in JavaScript, which is go and do a simple REST request to go create a new Planner task. And so here you can see I'm doing some things like generating a title. I'm generating a number of different pieces. I have a pre-existing access token that I'm going to go refresh and go generate. So I have some code to go get that access token. And then from there, I can go structure a JSON request and go put it into place. Now, one of the things I do is I put it inside of a Planner bucket. Planner has some powerful bucketing capabilities. And so once I'm done with all of that work, I can go make a post request to v1.0/planner/tasks and go post this particular set of plan information that I've generated from that incoming form, into that Planner task. And so that's all great. And once I'm done, I can go hand back a response, back to that email so that, users see a, your task was completed type of experience inside of their inbox. But the real key here is that it's just a simple REST request to go create Planner tasks. And now, as a developer, you've got this really powerful capability to, put things on people's agendas. So use it for good. It's a really powerful capability. Okay. So the final step that we want to talk about is how you can package this all up and expose it inside of Microsoft Teams. So you've built a great application, but if you don't get it into the hands of users, it can't be quite as effective. And getting it inside of Teams where people can use it is a really great tip as well. Now, there's a number of ways to do this inside of Teams. You can use things like Graph APIs to go create a team. So let me show you a little bit of what that looks like. So let me come back over here. Let's see. Okay, so I've got this application which allows me to go, maybe as the fiscal quarter turns, I can go create a new team inside of Microsoft Teams that's going to be this great new hub for us to work on our next quarter sales goals. So you can imagine this is maybe a CRM. Oops, sorry. Let me go try that one more time. Okay, let's go try to create this. I'm going to go use user delegated permissions to go create this. I'm going to go sign in one more time. Let's try this one more time. All right, cool. Okay, so what this is going to happen here is now I've kicked off this process to go create a new team, which you can imagine happens, every quarter inside of our organization. If I come here, you can see, okay, now it's actually automatically creating a team over here. I've created a custom channel called Inside Sales, or Inbound Sales, excuse me, which will allow me to track how our sales team is doing. And the really great thing is that I can also bundle in all of the applications that my sales team needs to get started. So in this case, I have a website, really a Bing map, but you could pin your own mapping application if you want. If Bing Maps is, Bing Maps is pretty great too. And then the other part of it is, in this case, I have a leads list that I'm also tracking. Again, leveraging that list capability that comes with my site to go track maybe some potential sales leads and some people that are interesting for our team to work with. And you can pin your own applications here. Let's go take a quick look at the code. So this is the code behind my application. You can see what I'm doing here is I'm creating a new group, and I'm giving it some very basic information about, here's all the info about my sales team. And then what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go add some applications and go, incorporate them in. So in this case, it's a map application. Okay, so that was a little bit about provisioning. Let's just wrap this up. So the other great thing that we're introducing is, a templating capability for end users. So soon the creation experience will have a number of different templates that users can pick from to automate the process of selecting applications. And as an end user, you can do kind of the same thing. You can define the set of channels and the set of apps that people can go use. So a really great tool there. So that was kind of a wrap up. We covered 4 building blocks. We took a little bit more time to kind of cover all those building blocks. And these are a number of skilling sessions with additional drill downs into more information. And if you want to get started, it all starts with Microsoft Graph, which is available on graph.microsoft.com. So with that, I apologize for taking a little bit longer to kind of get through all the content. Ben, would you like to come on and maybe ask a couple questions?
Hey, Mike, sure. We just have, 3 minutes here. So first question comes from Jordan S. Is lists essentially a new front end for SharePoint lists? Can a new list be based on any SharePoint list?
Yeah, so yes, the answer to your question is the list is kind of a new, it's sort of an enhanced user experience for lists. And it's also a new hub to kind of pull all the lists that you might be working with, your favorites, your recents, all into one place to make them easier to access. And then also, as you saw, there's a mobile application as well that gives you this focused editing capability for lists as well. But, fundamentally behind the scenes, it's all based on SharePoint lists.
And is there a limit to the size of the lists, either in file size or kilobits or the number of items you can have in a list?
There isn't really a limit on the size of a list. There are steps that you should take to make sure that your lists remain performant as that list grows in size. And some of the things that I mentioned, like indexing, are sort of a key tool there. Can you store millions and millions of items in a list? You can, but probably at that scale, you should probably be thinking about something like a SQL database table that will give you more headroom and more capability over time.
Okay, and we have about a minute and a half left. So Justin N had a quick question about auth, and he just wanted to know if the MSAL token that you acquire in your code there is tied just to the Graph API auth, or is it specific to an enterprise app that you have to set up with that auth request?
Yeah, so with Microsoft Graph, I mean, those tokens are always connected to an Azure AD application, which is kind of the way to kind of, that administrators can assign specific applications, specific permissions. Now, within Azure AD, it's pretty simple to sign up for one of those applications and go create it. But in that case, what you saw there is I was using user delegated permissions, which is the intersection of the permissions granted to the app and to the user, and that's how I authorize those REST API calls.
Well, I think that's about it. We are pretty much at a wrap. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, and thank you so much for attending the session. Sorry I didn't leave more time for questions. That's my bad. And I hope you've had a great build. And thank you so much for dropping in. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
See you.